Before we begin, please remember to hit that like button, subscribe, click that notification bell, and share this video with all your friends. Welcome back to another election night in America. Election night 2024. We have our four-party candidate. We have not seen this happen since 1916. Election night 2024 with the Democratic nominee Joe Biden going up for a second term. President Joe Biden. Now we have a Republican nominee, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. And in the Progressive Party, we have Bernie Sanders. And in the Trump Party, obviously, they nominated Donald Trump. Now with our approval ratings, Biden is plus 12 approved. That means 0 would mean 50-50. 50% approved, 50% disapproved. So Biden is up by 12%. Bernie Sanders is up by 9%. Nikki Haley is down by 1%. And Donald Trump is down by 15%. And in the blue wall of states, here are polling numbers. We are just using the, let me make up a channel name, DBC pollings. So +3 in the blue wall. Those are the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Those states that were from 1992 to 2012. That blue wall of states that always went narrowly to the Democrat, but they always went blue. Until in 2016 they broke that streak, but in 2016 they broke that streak. In 2020 they built it back. 3 points plus for Biden there. In Florida, there's a 1.6% lead for Nikki Haley, and this is much less of a lead than Donald Trump took in 2020. Because the reason, and Hillary did better in Florida actually than Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden seemed to do much better, because Hillary Clinton did appeal much better to those Latino voters in Miami-Dade County. So anyway, so Nikki Haley up by 1.6% in Florida. In North Carolina, she's up by 0.9%. Slim lead. Now in Minnesota, this state has the longest streak of being blue. I mean, longest streak. This state has gone blue. The last time it went to a Republican was in 1972. That's more than that's about 50 years. 7.3%, and in Ohio, 8.3% lead for the Republican, Nikki Haley. No Republican has ever won the White House without Ohio, so this is crucial to win. In the Sun Belt, meaning the states of Nevada, Arizona, all those areas, the Southwest, including Texas and to Georgia, all has a 2.1 in total % lead for Joe Biden. In Iowa, though, Nikki Haley has a 9.4% lead. Now, of course, this is besides Vermont. This is not counting any of the third-party votes, so this could be very wrong. But in Vermont, they have Bernie Sanders up by 19.6. Anyway, we have our 7:30 p.m. vote closings with the states of Vermont, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and the state of Indiana and Kentucky. States of Indiana and Kentucky. In Vermont, as you see, Bernie Sanders pulls ahead in the lead. He has 50.8% of the vote, whereas Joe Biden has 34.6% of the vote. Nikki Haley is 15.6%. In this state, they do not have Donald Trump on the ballot. Indiana, everyone's on the ballot. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump wins with his Vice President Mike Pence. His is his home state. And the Progressive Party got 11.8% of the vote here. The Democratic Party got 26.6%. The Republican Party got 8.7%. Very little in the usually Republican state. And 43.3% for Donald Trump. Now in Kentucky, the Republicans, the GOP pulls ahead here. Not by that big of margins. I'm sorry for the error on your screen. It says that Donald Trump is 30.1%, but indeed the Republicans have 30.1%. The Trump party is 28.3%. Sorry, they're accidentally interchanged. The Democrats had 28.6%, and the Progressive Party has 21.0%. South Carolina, only the Democrats and the Republicans were on the ballot. The South Carolina, the Republicans won. I know what you're saying. They're not winning, but only a couple Democratic counties have their votes have come out. So 54.4% for Democrats and 45.6% for the Republicans. In West Virginia, Donald Trump pulls ahead with 49.7% of the vote. The Republicans have 27.0% of the vote, and the Democrats have 23.3% of the vote. In Ohio, it is too early to call. The Democrats have 46.7% of the vote. Trump party is 34.4% of the vote, and the Republicans have 21.1%. And in North Carolina, it is also too close to call there, actually. The Democrats and the Republicans are the only one in the ballot in this state, and the Democrats have 49.6 and the Republicans have 49.3, meaning that the Democrats are literally only leading here they're only leading right now by about 138 votes. Wow. That number's probably going to widen, or the Republicans will take control. So anyway, Georgia is too close to call also. A bigger lead for the Democrats, though. They have 50.6% of the vote, whereas the Republicans have 48.9%. Anyway, let's get on to our road to 270. Bernie Sanders has 3 electoral votes from his home state of Vermont. Joe Biden only has 1 state, as Bernie Sanders does, but it's a much bigger state. He has the state of Virginia. Nikki Haley, she has the states of Kentucky and South Carolina. And Donald Trump has the states of Indiana and West Virginia. So Bernie Sanders has 3 electoral votes, Joe Biden has 13 electoral votes, Nikki Haley has 17 electoral votes, and Donald Trump has 15. Now with our 8 p.m. poll closings, we have poll closings from the states of Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. In Florida, Maryland, the Progressive Party pulls ahead with 54.6% of the vote, Democrats only getting 23.3% of the vote, and the Republicans getting 19.8% of the vote. In Delaware, also Donald Trump's not on the ballot here, but the Democrats get 60% of the vote. The Progressive Party gets 25% of the vote, and the Republicans only get a mere 15%. New Jersey, only the Democrats and the Republicans are on the ballot. The Democrats get 61% of the vote here, and the Republicans get 39% of the vote. Illinois, the Progressive Party is not on the ballot here, surprisingly. And the Trump Party isn't either, but they still got a couple of votes. 57% of the vote going to the Democrats, 40% of the votes going to Republicans, and 3% of the votes going to the Trump Party. Connecticut, 54% of the vote is going to the Democrats. Republicans get 40% of the vote, and the Progressive Party gets 6% of the vote here. In Massachusetts, 65% of the vote goes to the Democrats. The Republicans only can hold on to that 33% of the vote. In Rhode Island, 3 electoral votes. The Democrats slimly win, but they're mainly Republican counties reporting so far, so this lead is expected to widen by 6 times. Anyway, the Democrats have 50% and the Republicans have 46% here. And in New Hampshire, the swing state, key race alert, the Democrats have 43% of the vote, the Republicans have 23%, and the Trump Party is 30%. Maine's first district, congressional district, and at-large vote. They split up their vote into 2 congressional districts and an at-large vote, and this is Maine's first district, congressional district, and the at-large vote, with the Progressive Party with 55% of the vote, the Democrats with 34%, and the Republicans only with a mere 10% of the vote here. In Alabama, wow, big flip. 36% of the vote going to the Democrats, 29% going to the Republicans, and 34% going to the Trump party. In Pennsylvania, the Democrats pull ahead for victory. They have only 3% more, with 49% of the votes going to the Democrats and 46% of the votes going to the Republicans. In Michigan, the Democrats get 46% of the vote and the Republicans get 39%, and the Democrats pulling ahead here. Mississippi, 34% of the vote goes to the Democrats. The Republicans get 24% of the vote. In the Trump party gets 32% of the vote here. In Missouri, the Democrats get 39% of the vote, pulling ahead to victory with only 2% more than the Trump party with 37% of the vote, and the Republicans have 34% of the vote. In Arkansas, the Democrats pull ahead very tightly. They only have 0.8% more than the Trump party. The Democrats at 33% of the vote, the Trump party is 32%, and the Republicans at 30%. In Tennessee, the Democrats pull ahead, 36% of the vote going to them, the Republicans getting 30% of the vote. In Tennessee, in the Trump party, I keep saying Tennessee instead of the Trump party. The Trump party gets 33% of the vote. In Oklahoma, the Trump win. 30% of the vote going to the Democrats, and the Trump party getting a narrow lead of 2.6% over the Republicans with 37% of the vote, and the Republicans securing 34% of the vote here. In Kansas, 34% of the vote is going to the Democrats, 29% going to the Republicans, and the Trump party gets 32% of the vote. In Florida, the Democrats pull ahead here and win the state, with 45% of the vote going to the Democrats in the Democratic column, 25% of the vote going to the Republicans, and in the Trump party, aka Tennessee, 27% of the vote goes to them. In Maine's 2nd district, though, the Democrats have 34% of the vote, the Progressives have 13% of the vote, and the Republicans have 51% of the vote, pulling ahead and winning this district. In Texas, though, the Democrats get a victory. The Democrats get 47% of the vote, the Republicans get 32% of the vote, and the Trump party gets 20% of the vote here. And on our road to 270, Bernie Sanders has 19 electoral votes, Joe Biden has 227 electoral votes, and Nikki Haley with 18 electoral votes, and finally, Donald Trump with 22 electoral votes. And on our it's 9 on the East, when we have some poll closings coming up. We have poll closings from the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New York, and Louisiana. In New York, the Democrats get 63% of the vote, and the Republicans get 35% of the vote here. Only those two on the ballot. In the same case in New Mexico, though, the Democrats only getting 57% of the vote, the Republicans getting 40%. Democrats win New Mexico. In Arizona, the Democrats win 49% of the vote, the Trump party wins 30% of the vote, and the Republicans win 29% of the vote here. Now in Colorado, only the two major parties are on the ballot here. 59% of the vote going to the Democrats and 39% of the vote going to the Republicans. Very big margin of victory there. In Wisconsin, the Democrats get 51% of the votes and the Republicans only get 46% of the votes, but it's enough to win the state of Wisconsin. In Minnesota, Democrats holding on to the streak of winning Minnesota. They win Minnesota with 15% more of the vote. The Democrats get 56% of the vote, and the Republicans only get 41%. In Louisiana, a flip from 2020. 46% of the votes going to the Democrats, 27% going to the Republicans, and 26% going to the Trump party. North Dakota, flip from 2020. Democrats get 37% of the vote, the Republicans get 33% of the vote, and the Trump party gets 29%. In South Dakota, similar situation there, though. The Democrats get only 1% more than the Republicans. They get 36%. The Republicans get 35%, and the Trump party gets 27%. In the most conservative state of Wyoming, the Republicans get a slim victory. They get only 2% more than the Democrats. 36% in the Republicans column. The Democrats get 34%, and the Trump party only gets 29%. In Nebraska, 2nd district. In Nebraska, all of Nebraska actually, 47% of the vote goes to the Democrats, 23% goes to the Republicans, 16% goes to the Trump party, and one of the few states with all four parties on the ballot. The Progressive Party only gets 4% of the vote here. And the presidency goes to Joe Biden. Joe Biden will be reelected president. He will be reinaugurated on January 20th of 2025. But anyway, though, we still have a lot of states that haven't been called anyway, with our 10 p.m. poll closings from the states of Montana, Nevada, Utah, and Iowa. In Montana, the Democrats get 36% of the vote. The Republicans only get 33% of the vote. The Trump party, though, gets less with 29% of the vote. Still a slim victory there. In Utah, actually, only the two major parties on the ballot, plus Evan McMullin and his independent party. The Democrats win with 39% of the vote. The Republicans get 31% of the vote. And Evan McMullin gets 30%. If he hadn't been on the ballot, the Republicans would have won the state, but the Democrats won the state. In Iowa, used to be a swing state, been swinging Republican lately, but with the only one Democratic nominee and two Republican kind of nominees, the state goes to the Democrats, with 36% of the vote going to the Democrats, 34% going to the Trump party, and 27% going to the Republicans. In Nevada, only the two major parties on the ballot, but the Republicans lose with 47% of the vote, and the Democrats win with 50% of the vote. In Ohio, now we finally can call Ohio 50% of the vote going to the Democrats, the Republicans only securing 45% of the vote there. In Georgia, the Democrats get 52% of the vote, and the Republicans only get 45% of the vote. With only the two major parties on the ballot, but the Democrats much overperform the polls here. In North Carolina, the Democrats win with 50% of the vote, the Republicans get 31% of the vote, and the Trump parties get 18% of the vote here in the state of North Carolina. And we have our 11 p.m. poll closings. It's 11 on the east, 8 on the west, and we have some polls closing in Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, and Alaska. In Idaho, the Democrats win it with 38% of the vote going to the Democrats, the Republicans getting 30% of the vote, and the Trump party getting 29% of the vote here. In California, it's not a squeaker. The Democrats secure the win with 34% of the vote. The Progressive Party gets 21% of the vote, the Republicans get 25% of the vote, and the Trump Party gets 20% of the vote. And I know, let me just acknowledge something. This has happened in a couple of other states, but this is the first time in a while that a third party's gotten more vote share in a state than one of the two major parties. But let's keep going. Oregon's 8 electoral votes, it gained 1 in the 2020 census. 50% of the votes going to the Democrats, 15% of the votes going to the Trump party. The Republicans securing 13% of the vote, and the Progressive Party getting more than either of the Republican side parties, getting 20% of the vote. In Washington, 12 electoral votes going to the Democrats. They win 58% of the votes, and the Republicans win 39%. In Alaska, wow, the Democrats secure the win there with 40% of the vote going to them. The Trump party gets 27% of the vote, and the Republican Party gets 30% of the vote there. And in Hawaii, though, the Progressive Party pulls ahead with a victory of only 0.6%. They win 29% of the vote, the Democrats win 28% of the vote, the Republicans win 26% of the vote, and the Trump party wins 16% of the vote. And obviously, as you see, we already know this, but Joe Biden will be reelected the president, and Kamala Harris will be reelected the vice president of the United States. And our final electoral map here, we have many flips. As you can see, the Democrats won in a landslide because so many of the Republican states only put one Democrat on the ballot, where 2 Republicans were on the ballot, and they each took vote away from each other, giving the victories to the Democrats. Okay. Was that insane? Or what? Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know if you liked the video, if you're happy with the results, and honestly, I don't really care if you're a Democrat or Republican or whatever, but if you feel comfortable, if you just want to, write in the live chat or the comments if you're a Democrat, Republican, or some independent party. Or if you don't know, just say what your parents are. Just now remember to leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video with all your friends. And by the way, comment if you think I was rushing too much. Bye.